Hi mobile developers! In the previous video, we implemented logs when there was an error trying to load the ISS tracker position, and we tested it by running the application and turning off the network connection. Today I want to show you how to test the same behavior with integration tests, which will make your tests more reliable and also faster since you don't have to be running your app every time you want to test. So let's begin with our tests. Events, logging, integration tests, logs, connectivity, HTTP request failure are given when then section. And in our integration test, we don't want to instantiate our events logger decorator in isolation. Instead, what we want is to instantiate it in composition with the rest of the components. The strategy is going to be that our factory method is going to provide us with a component which has some public behavior that we can invoke and achieve our expected behavior in integration. If we jump back to the architecture of our app, we can see that we have a presentation module which has only one class, the ISS tracker view model, and we see that this class is in charge of invoking the ISS tracker loader load ISS position method. So it's a good candidate for our integration system under test. So we could start by creating a new composition method by extending our current app composer, and our method is going to look something like compose with. And since we want to have an HTTP response failure, we're going to have to inject some kind of HTTP client that will always fail in order to have a robust integration test that doesn't depend on connectivity. So our method is going to receive an HTTP client object. And also we are not going to log events, let's say, to Firebase, because that's going to be very expensive. So instead we want to inject some kind of dummy logger, and we could return the ISS tracker view model. So in our factory method, we're going to need some kind of object that always returns a failing HTTP request. So we can implement a always failing HTTP client, and that will always complete with an error. It can be any error, so we can create a variable called any error. Now we can inject this new dummy object into our composition, and we can use our dummy logger. The closure for our dummy logger, we can inject it in our factory method. We can make it escaping, and that's our factory method. So going back to the tests, we can instantiate our SUT, which is going to be the ISS tracker view model, and inject the closure for the logger, which is going to be where we're going to assert that the error was logged. So we will assert that the message is of type connectivity localized description. In our when section, we're going to invoke the public behavior of our view model. We're gonna create our expectation. Now it's time to implement our new composition method. So we can guide ourselves by going back to our app composer, and we want to extract all the logic we need to instantiate our ISS tracker view model. We can copy and paste all the logic from the original build method from the app composer, and we can modify it to achieve what we want. So we want to return a view model. Instead of instantiating the console logger, we will use the one that we are injecting. So logger. And instead of using the Alamofire HTTP client, we're going to use the one we are injecting as well. Now the compiler is complaining because any HTTP client cannot conform to HTTP client. We need to add the some keyword. So it's time to run the test, and it failed because we forgot to fulfill our expectation. Run the test again. Now we see that our test failed because there's multiple invocations to the expectation fulfillment, and that's because we are logging two different events every time we do a request and when the request responds with a failure. We can easily fix this by removing the first events logger decorator that decorates the HTTP client every time we make a request, and inject the HTTP client directly. Run the tests again. Now it's passing. Time to commit. Testing ISS tracker position loading error logs in integration. Now, as always, it's time to move our code to production. And since now we have code duplication, it's time to compose one method with the other. So wherever we want to instantiate the view model in our build static method, we can replace it with compose with our analytics logger. Logger here as well. And there we have it. Now we don't need these variables here anymore. Run the tests again. And they're still all passing. So we divided our composition methods in two, making our life much easier to test things in integration. The composition is the only layer that it's fine to be modifying, because that's actually what you want. You want to be able to change it easily by moving around components, and that way achieving the results you want. Software should be soft, which means it should be easy to change. And the composition layer is the correct spot to be changing things. All other components are meant to be extended if possible. So let's commit. Moving composition method to production. Finally, let's run the app again to check that everything is still working. And there it is, our International Space Station current position in real time. So that's it for today, guys. See you in the next one. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe.